And speaking of getting a move on, I guess, this video is from Lucky Ghost. And he talks about a specific thing that I think that comes up a lot with Star Citizen is soloing in this MMO, hopefully, environment. In all MMOs, there's lots of solo players, and we could just got off the topic of like multi-crew and what makes it good. And now, I did find this video on Spectrum, and it sounds interesting. So, soloable MMOs, solo players saved the genre. And before I jump in, I know that there was an experience where the game that I used to play a lot, an MMO that I used to play a lot, became more solo centric, and you would be able to do nearly everything alone and very often didn't need a friend there with you. And they never really changed that. And it was good and bad. It really kind of ruined the MMO experience, but it was also fun. So, yeah. Let's see.
Talk about something interesting. Hey guys, it's Lucky here, and today we're going to talk about something interesting. I'm making this video because I realized something. Most of us are loners. Most of us don't have someone to play our favorite MMO with when we log in every day, but we keep coming back in spite of that. And even if we do have someone to play with, sometimes we just want to play alone. Take a look at Asmongold, who started his YouTube channel 8 years ago, teaching people how to solo group content.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold. I'm going to show y'all how to solo Conclave of Wind. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold, and today we're continuing the series on how to solo Glory of the Cataclysm Hero. What's up, y'all?
Oh, wow. Okay. I never knew that's not how he started.
Today, I'm going to show y'all how to solo Whisper Sword as a warrior.
Wait, is he speaking to you guys because none of you guys have friends?
Even those of us that do have friends have a hard time agreeing with those friends on what MMO to play and when, resulting on the people that do have friends also playing MMOs alone. This was made more apparent than ever when I tossed up a video on YouTube about MMOs that you can play alone or without friends, and it absolutely blew up. You guys devoured this thing, shedding some light on the fact that, hey, a lot of us spend most of our time playing MMOs solo, and we recognize that. MMORPGs are more and more turning into RPGs that happen to be online. Is it the developers?
They happen to be RPGs that have like general chats and stuff. I don't like that personally, but at the same time, there's absolutely like your leveling experience typically done solo, right? Your day-to-day like crafting or your whatever dailies you may feel that you have to do, or whatever dailies the game forces you to feel like you have to do, right? Is the idea of no matter what, there is a solo element to an MMO. Like your own player progression is typically done alone in these games. They're not always done with others, but I think some of the most rewarding content and, the most rewarding items are usually earned in like raid or dungeon scenarios, which is fun. And I've never played WoW, but I continuously hear that the dungeon finder in WoW is what killed the MMO aspects of it, because it was difficult to find a good group for a raid or a dungeon or whatever, and people like they automated the system, and it kind of took away that, hey, anybody want to help me with XYZ thing? So yeah.
Is implementing it, or is it us demanding it? Why is it that most players today log into their massively multiplayer game and spend the majority of their time playing alone? These are all interesting questions, but perhaps the most interesting question of all is it ruining the genre? Is the fact that MMOs are becoming more and more of a solo experience contributing to the decline of the genre? I'm going to try to answer all of those questions today. In the early days of the MMO genre, you needed a group for just about everything, and even if you could solo something, getting a group was generally a lot faster and more efficient. If you played an MMO back in the early 2000s, you probably had a pretty tight-knit circle, or at least a guild that you spent a lot of time with. You probably even remember a lot of those players today.
Like you needed a guild. And I think that there's something special about that. Like there was bouncing between guilds until you found a group that you liked. Like even in New World, like once my friends stopped playing it, I started looking for guilds and like join discords and things like that. And all of those people were weird and cringe, and it wasn't a great experience. But at the same time, eventually, if I continued to play the game, and that's honestly one of the reasons why I quit, was because there wasn't a good group to play with. Yeah, like I joined some discords. Those guys were weird people.
They were people that became not just online acquaintances, but actual friends that you logged into the game for and grouped up with and ran through content together. It was just part of the game, and it was just what you did. And if you didn't, well, you wouldn't be getting a whole lot done, and you'd probably quit. Except players didn't quit. MMOs were never more popular than they were when they were forcing introverts to join guilds and get things done. When MMOs were hard instead of easy. But today, the most popular MMOs seem to be designed around the player that is not interested in joining guilds, around the player that doesn't want to challenge in their questing experience. Dungeon finders, raid finders, not to mention the fastest way to level is usually what? It's the main story quest, which is almost entirely a solo experience carved straight through the MMO. We are at a point now where it's often less productive and less efficient to play our massively multiplayer games with other players. Grouping up used to be the fastest way to level, if not the only way to level. Battles were difficult, and it wasn't uncommon for there to be significant penalties for dying. You were all in it together.
Like, I remember when I first started leveling in Ultima Online, way back, I think it was like 2003, something like that. No, 99? I think it was 99. You would go to this place where there was skeletons, and you would kill them over and over and over again, and that's all you would do. It was incredibly boring, but there were other people there killing skeletons with you, right? And you would talk to those people. And, oh, hey, where are you from, or whatever, and you would start, you know, like, you would go through the leveling process together. And then once you were too good for those, you go to the next spot. And guess who was there? The person that you were leveling with at the last place, right? And you know, and those end up being people that, like, oh, are you in a guild? Like, you're right. And then you join their guild, and then you start hanging out with them, and then you have friends for life and things like that. Like, these are scenarios that are so kind of cool.
Together. You actually needed each other, and every role in the group was incredibly important as a result. There was always a lot on the line, creating a lot of moments to bond with the players around you. If you survived that sketchy pull or managed to take the boss down, you'd celebrate. I still remember waiting for high-level healers to come res me in games like Lineage 2 to get hours of my experience back when we had died and lost it on death. I also remember actually having to use crowd control abilities to survive when someone in the group tab targeted the wrong enemy by accident.
I mean, did you hear that comment that he just made there? You can apply that to Star Citizen easily. I remember waiting for high-level healers to come res me in Lineage 2 so I didn't lose my experience. Death of a Spaceman, Star Citizen, right? And the current medical service beacons that we have now.
I miscalculated.
Everyone needed to be present and give it their all. But not just that, there was an incentive to bond with those players. There was an incentive to perform at your best. If you had a tank with clean pulls that could maintain aggro, or a healer that kept everyone standing, that was special. You remembered those players, you added them as friends, because that's the only way you would make sure you had a group to do that stuff with the next day. There wasn't a dungeon finder that you could queue into while watching Netflix and YouTube. You had to be social, and you had to try. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows.
No,
if you think Tinder is hard on average,
like, there's good moments to that, and there's definitely the, like, I only have a couple hours to play tonight, I'd like to do this dungeon, and you can't, you know?
Looking nerds today, you should try being an average damage dealing DPS in the early 2000s. When tanks and healers logged into the game, they got swiped right on more than supermodels on Tinder. They were instantly messaged by desperate damage dealers begging for a group so they could actually leave town. But just like on Tinder, those tanks and healers swiped left on almost all those requests. They were already spoken for. They had already fallen into a static group. Desperate damage dealers had already locked them down. It was the best.
Now imagine if you were a girl and you were a tank or healer. Holy shit.
Time to be a tank and a healer, and probably the worst time to be a damage dealer. But man, when you found that clique, a group that you look forward to logging in with and playing with every day, it was special. You'd shoot the breeze in comms while grinding through a dungeon until late in the night, knowing you'd all log back in the next day and maybe try out that new leveling spot or that new dungeon that you were all finally high enough level to do. But on the flip side, while some players were in that group making those memories, there were plenty of other players signing in just to realize
4-day weekend Can't find
realized they weren't going to get a group in time for it to be worth it, and they'd sign back out again after trying for sometimes hours. In other words, players were spending as much time looking for a group as they were being in a group. I remember standing in town looking for groups in Aiden and Lineage 2 or in Juno in Final Fantasy 11. I was a DPS in both games, and there were a lot of nights where I didn't get a group because I signed on too late due to school or work or life. And while I miss the camaraderie that came with forcing everyone to play together all the time, I don't miss that part of it. And even if you were one of the lucky ones that managed to form a static group, it only lasted so long. One person would level too fast, or one would level too slow, or one would go full Leroy Jenkins. Let's do this. Leroy and your odds of playing together the next day weren't great. But I'd take those odds right now because at the moment, indicators are suggesting that a recession is on the way, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Masterworks. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, said that what's coming could be worse than a recession. So what are experts doing to prepare? They're following recently released guidance from BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, who says that a normal portfolio of stocks and bonds won't cut it anymore. For 2022 and beyond, BlackRock recommends diversifying with alternative assets. And of all the alternatives,
chat, let's buy the Mona Lisa together.
Out there, only one was personally recommended by BlackRock CEO Larry Fink: contemporary art. Probably because contemporary art has outpaced the S&P 500 for the last 25 years by more than double, and it appreciates more than gold, real estate, and the S&P when inflation is high, at a whopping 33% annually. Repeating, of course. That's why I've partnered with Masterworks, because they're helping you secure your financial future by offering investments in the same contemporary art. This is not NFTs. This is fractional shares of
this is not NFTs.
Actual paintings by legends like Picasso and Banksy. When Masterworks sells the paintings that you are invested in, you get a potential return. And the 6 paintings that they've sold so far have averaged a 29% net annual return, even through COVID, a bear market, and record high inflation. Now, of course, past performance is no guarantee of future results, but I think this is absolutely an option to consider when diversifying your portfolio. With inflation,
dude, this is really something like aimed at really old people. Because they're showing how it like outperforms the S&P 500, and it's like an MMO video. Oh, we're so old because we played MMOs.
Inflation's
That's
still
like
crazy high and stock's still crazy
scary.
low. Masterworks is seeing a record demand, but you can skip the waitlist by clicking the link down in the description
He's really trying
below.
to sell this?
Thanks
No,
for listening,
he has like
and let's
a
get
thing
back
he
to
has
it.
to read.
Okay, so like I was saying, it's nearly impossible for a group of people to sync their lives together in a way that would allow them to progress through an MMO at the exact same speed. And even if you did have a static group and you were committed to staying in that static group, there would be days where you couldn't play because that meant you would outlevel the people in the group. And there's the rub. That's the reason that MMOs focused on.
I mean, my most recent experience in New World, it was like Dade, Talton, and one other guy. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now. Just they had more time to play, so we were all leveling together on day 1. On day 2, they were 10 levels past me.
On having a solid single player experience began their rise to dominance. If the MMO had a fleshed out enough solo experience, you always had something to do. If your friends weren't on, or if you didn't have any to begin with, you could still make great progress in the game. And this was a welcome change. And more than ever before, we're seeing MMOs focus on the solo experience all the way from early on in their development. Here's a clip from the recent Ashes of Creation developer update.
Ashes of Creation is looking to fulfill both that solo-oriented mind in gameplay, as well as the group and social experience.
Wow, no way, guys. Ashes of Creation is going to be everything you ever wanted it to be.
Kind of started this, in my opinion. It had a very casual questing experience that would take you all the way through most of the game, but initially it lacked the Dungeon Finder. Later on, toward the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, the Dungeon Finder was finally added. No longer were we walking to dungeons and forming groups in zone chat. We are now queued into an instance and tossed into a group that may or may not acknowledge each other's existence in group chat. We successfully got rid of boring hours of standing around looking for a group, but we also successfully got rid of a ton of social interaction in the process. You don't need to make friends.
And let me tell you something. After going to Bar Citizen, y'all need some social interaction. Okay? You guys, I had a southern draw for a second. You guys need some social interactions, because boy, were they bad at it at that.
You can just queue up for a dungeon when you want to.
It was
on your
crazy.
schedule. It didn't matter if you were great at the game or bad at it. You'd get tossed into a group all.
The Dungeon Finder literally is the reason why people were awkward at Bar Citizen.
The same. There was a lot less social accountability. One inevitable downside to this, dungeon content began to be designed for these types of groups. Random groups of strangers were more prone to giving up on a group as soon as it was apparent it wasn't going to be a smooth dungeon experience. They knew they could simply queue up for a dungeon group later, and as a result, commitment to the group was lacking, and you couldn't have content as difficult as you used to. People just wouldn't stick around through the wipes. The solution was to make dungeon content easier. When's the last time you used a CC ability on an ad? No way.
I mean, that's such a good point too, right? Like when you don't care about the people that you're playing with to complete the task, if they're not good enough, you just leave until you find one that is good enough. And when it's your group, you work together to get better. You teach them, you say, come on, let's do it this way. Let's try this. Hey, step it up, little Timmy. You know?
You pull that bad boy in and melt it down with everything else. Relying on players to CC mobs was tedious. It required communication. Cleaving it all down was easy. Everyone could be on the same page without even having to talk to each other. And I see this in almost every MMO. Dungeons are generally pretty easy. They generally don't require a lot of communication, and as a result, they often end up being pretty forgettable. You romp through it, you melt everything inside, and then you forget the people and the content that you experience. It'd now be fair to describe most MMORPGs as single-player games with some group content tacked onto the side. All of the biggest MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, ESO, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, they've all got tons and tons of solo content for you to do when you log in. Oftentimes they have way more solo content than they do group content, and they've succeeded all the more for it. Players have spoken silently and with their wallets. They gravitate towards the MMOs with a fleshed out solo experience. They want the option.
And that's understandable, right? I think a majority of the time being more than 50%, but I don't think it should be significantly more than 50% of the time that you play an MMO. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that being a solo experience, like 55, 60% of the time. But once you start crossing into like 70-30, 80-20,
to group up on their schedule and not somebody else's, and sometimes they want the option to not have to group up at all. So this begs the question, why play MMOs at all if you're the person that doesn't want to interact with anyone at all? And it's a fair question, but I think it's the fact that MMOs are an unending story. They're not just about interacting with other people, they are about the journey, the days, the weeks, the months that we put into them. They'll be relevant for years. It always feels bad when you're watching a good show and you go to put on the next season only to find out.
That's why the Vandal Mask was so, devastating for me, because I put in 3-4 days of work into that.
There isn't one. The show got canceled years ago. Or maybe this calls for a more direct comparison, such as when you're enjoying a single player game and you have an epic fight and you get that bittersweet feeling because you know a final battle when you see one. It's epic, it gives closure, and you're completely aware of the fact that you're likely only a few lines of dialogue and maybe a cutscene away from putting the game down forever. The character you're leveling up, the skills you unlock, the cool cosmetics you found, you'll never see them again, nor will.
All right, so Hegemon in chat is saying, wait for it. The predictably constant ignoring how there are escalated difficulty modes for dungeon raids, etc., which are still there and centered on rewarding that more pre-made group kind of gameplay. Again, don't play WoW, but I know that there's like mythic levels, right? What is like, is there a max level? And then what are the rewards better, right? Can you get the same rewards from a certain level than the top level? Is it just harder, right? So I'm, again, never played WoW, and I think that that's like kind of the go-to in these scenarios. But here's the deal. If you never plan on doing Mythic plus whatever, then do you even need that gear? Like, what's the reason for having that gear? And I don't quite see the idea behind it. Like for me, instead of making the same dungeon have difficulty levels, there should just be a hard dungeon that rewards a unique item. That's what old MMOs did. It was this thing that you had to do if you wanted a certain item or a certain thing or a certain group of items.
Anyone else. You beat the game and you'll probably never boot it up. It's a conflicting moment of wow, that was amazing, and damn, it's over. And that's where MMORPGs come
Yeah,
in.
so just
They
gear
don't end,
score? I
or
don't know.
at least you
So
hope
you
they
still
won't
have
anytime
the
soon. You don't have to
legendary,
walk
right?
away from the story and the character and the hero you leveled. You'll be jumping back onto it in the next expansion. There's also the fact that playing alone isn't always a conscious choice. It's not always a decision made through social anxiety. Sometimes it just happens that way. I don't consider myself a solo MMO player, but if I look back at my recent experiences in MMOs, I have a lot of time spent playing solo.
Yeah,
it
same.
wasn't even a conscious decision I made.
I am far from a solo player, but like, how many times have you turned on the stream and I'm playing by myself? 90% of the time right now.
But my schedule fell out of sync with the people I tended to group with. I played the MMO for half the day and then maybe went to work on a YouTube video. The next day, they were levels ahead of me and it didn't make sense to group. Or on the flip side, I'd be the one degenning the MMO the way we MMO players sometimes do, and someone in the group would have work, a new girlfriend, a new kid, or school, and they'd fall out of sync. And there's one critical problem that's arisen with
Just don't have kids. Grind the MMO. Jeez.
new progression rates of MMOs today. Even though you're only a day or two behind your friends, you might as well be on a different server while you're leveling up. They're working on different dungeons, different zones, and they're grabbing different materials, and while of course completing completely different quests. Fortunately, once you hit max level, that problem mostly tends to fade away, but you have to get to max level first, and so few players do these days. Look at New Worlds. Look at Lost Ark. This is why it's so critical for games to have a solo
How did people not get to max level in New World? Like, it was not hard.
friendly leveling experience. As much as we all dream of jumping into an MMO with our friends and leveling through the whole thing together, life just gets in the way. Most of us have either school, jobs, significant others, or a family, or some combination of the four that require varying amounts of our time. So let's circle back to the question at the beginning of the video. MMOs were more popular than ever when they forced us to play together, when they lacked dungeon finders and raid finders. But these days, MMOs are often built with the solo player at the forefront of their design. Do MMOs attract fewer players because of this change, or do MMOs attract fewer players because we changed? WoW's population peaked at around 12 million current subscribers.
That's a good question. Did the MMOs change because we changed, or did MMOs change because they changed? Like, I think the age of the MMO player, like we implied in that that art ad, I think we changed. We don't have the time that we had before. So they've made decisions to make the time outside of enjoying whatever game you wanted to play, like more convenient stuff. And conveniency took away the social aspects of the game a little bit. But yeah, I think most people don't have the ability to do that. And like data streamer, I made time. Now I can play 5 hours a night. I mean, good for you. Not everybody's able to do that. And I would imagine most people aren't able to do that, right? I would gather that most people have 1 to 2 hours a night to play, if that, if they have children and, wives and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but I'm curious what he says next, because yeah, I mean, I think mostly the MMO player is older. So we're in the age of children, school, work, instead of come home from school at 3 p.m. If you're a big MMO player, I doubt, like I played a lot of sports, but I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say maybe the rest of your free time was spent in a computer chair and not on a baseball field or a soccer field or something like that. So you had, you did your homework, and then you had a good amount of hours that evening to play World of Warcraft or whatever.
All the way back in 2010. It's been on the decline since, and no other MMO has even come close to reaching its concurrent player base. Why is that? Is it due to switching the focus to the solo experience? I don't think so. The most successful MMOs today have the best solo content. I think we changed, so the MMOs had to follow suit. We were once okay with standing in town for an hour
I think it was
looking
from
for a
feedback.
group. It was all new and shiny, this whole going online and grouping with people from around the world. Most players had never really experienced that before, but the novelty wore off. The excitement of being able to log into a game and play it with other people wasn't new anymore and no longer outweighed the disappointment of standing in town looking for a group. And not only that, every week new online games were popping up that could also satisfy that same online desire. The only difference is they had you in a match in 5 minutes. Today, being subjected to an hour-long wait in town, trying to form a party in zone chat is a quit moment for most players. There's too many other options now, too many other multiplayer games that will have you in a match in an instant. Some say MMOs are dead as a result, and I don't agree with that. Recent MMO launches have been insane.
I mean, it's why I don't play Albion Online, because I had to play solo for in a full loot PvP game, would have to play solo for hours on end to level my character to a point where a guild would even accept me.
There are still millions of players looking for and hoping for an MMO to grab them the way that the genre once did. You saw it twice in the last year, with millions showing up for the launches of New World and Lost Ark. Neither of those games held on to all of their players, but there were a lot of reasons for that prevent those games from being indicators of a dead genre. Lost Ark's pay to win.
In Ultima Online, when I came back, because I played it when I was a kid, then I went to college and I didn't play it. And I found poker, and when poker died, I came back to Ultima Online, and there was a guild that specialized in like people that have been gone for a while and were coming back, and they like got you back up to gear, basically back up to like understanding what the game was today rather what it was like 5 years ago. And that extended my time playing that game years, where if I never found that guild, I would have just quit then, right? So that's the thing, is I do agree with him. We've changed where we're not willing to make the effort to find that guild. Or, I mean, honestly, if you do find that guild, if the people aren't cool, then what do? Like, I found that guild in New World where they were like, all right, we're going to go through, we're going to level you, we'll get you, you know, the gear score that you need or whatever, and get you guys up to snuff. And what happened? They were all weird, and they were just like, yeah, just like, I think somebody said something like racist or something like just really like misogynist or some weird shit in Discord, and I was just like, yeah, I'm good. See you later. And then I don't think I
will only ever see limited success here in the West, despite actually being a solid game. Like, New World, it came out of the oven half-baked. It wasn't finished, but it's now making the same pivot the rest of the major MMOs did after their launches. It's hard focusing on that solo experience. It's completely revamped and fleshed out its questing experience so that you can follow a main quest chain all the way through the game. It also added a dungeon finder. It's realized that these are the things that most MMO players crave these days. Is all of this working for New World? In anticipation of all this new content, combined with its new zone and new weapon, its player base is up 40% in the last 30 days. Wait, scratch that. I just refreshed the page. Make that 46% in the last 30 days. Looks like their focus on the players without friends is starting to pay off. So has the solofication of MMOs ruined the genre? I don't think so. The developers didn't make MMOs solo. We did, by gravitating towards the MMO that offered the stronger solo experiences. When I'm playing MMOs, most of my time is spent doing what I want to do. When I want to do it, I am literally one of the players taking advantage of the solo experience MMOs are now adding. I frequently tune into Asmongold, who has millions of people that would love to play with him, and see him doing the same thing. Whether it's farming mounts in WoW or grinding up his gathering levels in New World, he's also taking advantage of the solo opportunities. I think it's because it's nice to be able to go at your speed. Sometimes you just want a solo chill activity. When you're a content creator,
see, but I mean, he might go into the when you're a content creator thing. Asmon knows how to be a content creator. It's interacting with your chat. It's talking. It's all these things. I'm sorry, but when you're playing with a group, you are not interacting with you are not streaming. Okay? You are essentially a live YouTube video where nobody has any interaction with you, the streamer, or any part of the conversation with you, the streamer, while they are doing raid type content or group content or anything like that. Period. Even, it's not because he's too big. It's the same case here on my channel with what? A fraction of a percentage of Asmon's view count, right? It's not about him being too big. It's about what works and what doesn't. period.
Trying to keep up with chat, or a dad trying to keep up with children, or students trying to keep up with class.
Not
the
while I'm playing with
flexibility
you.
of having the solo content to dive into on those nights where you only have an hour or your friends aren't available, it makes all the difference when you're deciding what game to boot up. And as history shows, when one game offered the experience of standing in town trying to form a group and another offered anything else, we gravitated towards anything else. And worded like that, it's not so surprising, is it? I think the best thing MMOs can do now is have a ton of solo content waiting for us when we need it, and a ton of group content waiting for us when we want it. And that's the big difference. A lot of times when you're doing the solo content, it's because you need it. It's because there isn't really an option to do the group content at the moment, because you don't have people.
Solo content needs to be there when there's nothing else to do. But the achievements and everything, the goals, all of the I guess achievements is the best word, should be in that group style
available to do it, or you don't have the time to do it. In conclusion, solo content didn't ruin the genre, it kept it relevant. We're just not willing to stand around town for hours at a time looking for groups anymore. There's too many other online games that can put us into a game instantly. What type of player are you? Are you the solo player or the group player, or a little of both? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more MMO content and to help out with Algorithm Senpai. I appreciate it. And if you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it. This is just my opinion. These are just my ramblings, so you're certainly welcome to disagree. And as always, a massive shout out to my YouTube members. Thank you so much for joining and helping support the channel so that I can continue to make the best content possible for you guys. And if you ever want to hang out with someone else that loves MMOs, be sure to swing by my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. And if you don't have any plans, maybe check out one of the videos popping up on screen right now.
That's cool. I've never watched one of his videos before, but that was really good. He's clearly he clearly gets it, I think, and that was a really, really well thought out and good video. And yeah, I mean, it makes me think. Like I always think back, and I think a lot of people do this in MMOs, about what was so great is the social aspects of Star Citizen, and then, or not Star Citizen, of MMOs, and then like those are the moments you remember, but in reality most of your time was probably spent soloing, leveling, crafting, I don't know, messing around with your house, organizing your inventories, right? Like there's tons of like solo things you could do, and then you get in and do the group content with people. Like I remember every morning before I went to work, or for me it was afternoon because I worked at night, every afternoon I would gather all the keys that we needed to do dungeons. Then I would work all night, come back at like 7 a.m. And at 7 a.m., me and my friend would go do, it was just two of us, would go do what was meant to be many people content, but we were able to do it just the two of us, and we would just run those dungeons, bang 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 bang, all night. Then the morning came around, time to go to bed. If we got some good gear, we would sell it or use it or whatever, and then that was it. That's what I did every day, and that was like one of the best experiences I had, was doing that, right? So because I would just talk to the guy, and then more people started playing with us, and then we joined a PvP group, and yeah, it just got better and better and better over time. But that was, I guess, most of my experience was solo. But I really like the way he framed it. Was solo content needs to be there when you need it, and multiplayer content needs to be there when you want it. When you're ready to reach for a new achievement or a new height or whatever, right? Loved that video. Thank you, Lucky Ghost. That was awesome.